minutes from last
Second.
month.
All right, we have a motion and a second. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you for that. And we have item 3B, the fiscal year 23 millage rate. Al Burns and Nick. I see. Now that he's leadership after, he doesn't have to get up. I send my people to do this.
Morning, everyone.
Morning.
Committee members. My name is Nick Sagan, acting financial planning and analysis manager. You also know me as the spreadsheet wizard. This morning, I'm here with an action item to. What is this? Can I just borrow the mouse? So this morning, I'm here with an action item to recommend approval of proposed rate 0.75 mils to be transmitted over to the property appraiser's office. So this is far from the most interesting subject matter this morning, but we'll power through with a good PowerPoint. So upon approval of this, we will be sending out 0.75 mils for the property appraiser to include on the true notices that get mailed out to the homeowners. That'll be next month.
Nick, can you hold on a sec? Are they able to hear online, anyone, or based on, because he's not in front of the microphone, I don't know.
Oh,
if
yeah,
It's all picking up, okay?
Yeah.
Okay, I just want to make sure that as we're going through this, that it's, okay, never mind, continue as is.
So yeah, the rate will be transmitted to the property appraiser and then it gets shown up on the trim notices that go out next month. So 0.75 mils is the max that PSDA is allowed to apply. And this has been the rate that we've had since about fiscal year 2016. So we have some good news to share with you. What we've included for property taxes in the proposed budget was approximately $69.3 million. And what we received from property appraiser on July 1st was just a little bit more. Now we're going to be including $69.6 million. So we'll be having $368,000 more in property taxes now than what you saw back in June. So every penny counts, right? Some good news. So what's coming up? The rate that you approved today, again, will be subject to 2 public hearings that we'll have here at PSDA in September. The first will be Wednesday, September 14th at 6 p.m. Again, that's here. This will be advertised on the trim notice that gets mailed out next month. And at this meeting, you all will approve a tentative millage rate as well as the budget, the tentative budget for fiscal year 2023. Following that, we'll have another public hearing 2 weeks later, Wednesday, September 28th at 6 p.m. again here at PSDA. And this will be advertised in the Tampa Bay Times the Sunday before on September 25th. And at this meeting, the millage rate and budget for fiscal year 2023 will be approved and considered final. The millage rate that you approved today will be the highest rate we can apply in September. So again, the action item in front of you today is to recommend approval of the proposed budget, or proposed rate of 0.75 mils to be transmitted to the property appraiser's office. With that, Chair, I'll take any questions.
Are there any questions or comments?
Move approval of the recommended rate of 0.075 mils.
Second.
All right, we have a motion from Commissioner Flowers and a second from Commissioner Albritton. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, that passes unanimously. Thank you. And now we're on to the shelter deployment plan with BJ Gavin.
Mr. Chair and Planning Committee, thank you for having us today. I'm BJ Gavin. This is Devin Deal. The next agenda item relates to PSDA shelter deployment plan and the engineering support to execute that plan. The recommended action for this item will be approval of an equity tool for shelter deployment and a task order with AECom for a not to exceed amount of $60,000 for engineering and architectural design services in support of that plan. Here you'll recognize the familiar situation. We have 2 riders waiting for the bus. It's on its way, but it's raining outside. While the bus is just a few minutes out, this is the only safe harbor around. This picture shows PSTA delivering on its mission statement to safely connect people to places. We often think about bus safety when we hear that goal, but protection from the elements for our riders is part of that total trip safety. Our current shelter deployment plan is good, but I'm going to share with you how we're updating that plan to target PSDA's most in need locations with shelters first, and leverage all available metrics and resources to prioritize those most in need. Here are a few examples of sites we might get requests at. These pictures represent only a partial sampling of those site types. Some here with legacy shelters, those no longer deployed. Some are bench sites, some are even less. As it stands now, we review ridership, boarding and lighting safety, bus operational safety, and feasibility and cost. With the existing shelter deployment plan, this is what decisions might look like after evaluation. And so the yeses would eventually move on to a deployment for a shelter like this. And although we're deploying shelters at stops in need now, we see an avenue for improvement. The existing shelter deployment plan is a 2-choice system, yes or no, that indicates approval but not priority, where deployment is often determined by those who are most vocal and a squeaky wheel gets the grease kind of fashion. So we plan to change that. Next, I'll turn the presentation over to Devin to talk about the equity portion of the update to the shelter deployment plan.
Good morning, Planning Committee. My name is Devin. I'm a transit manager with PSTA, and I'm excited to introduce you to our equity index today. So we created our equity index using national equity best practices and standards from transit and transportation agencies around the country. And from these studies and analyses, we used 4 equity variables to rank census blocks in Pinellas County by equity concern. What this does is help us fill the equity gap in organizational decision-making where we distribute our amenities. And what I mean by that is we know how many riders we need for a PSA to install a bench, for PSA to pay for a shelter. Safety can roughly stop and tell you if a stop is safe based on how far it is from an intersection. But we have no uniform method to account for equity in our decision-making. And so this allows us to weigh our decisions with amenity distribution through an equity lens and target our services and amenities where it's needed most in the county. So the 4 equity variables that we selected were median household income, minority population, disabled population, and limited English-speaking households. From these variables, we created an equity score and assigned that to each census block, and then used the score in the census block to assign to each stop and determine the equity concern of the stops. This map on the right side is the Pinellas County Equity Index, and you can see the darker the colors, the higher equity concern. And down here, you can see it really highlights South St. Pete, a low-income, high-minority population area. You can see areas of concern, South Pinellas Park, Leland area, which is low-income, high disability. You can see south and downtown Clearwater really highlights the limited English-speaking population that lives there and low-income population in general. So the goal of this, as we said, is to really move forward with equitable distribution of our amenities and factor equity into our decision-making. And with that, I will pass the presentation back over to BJ.
Thanks, Devin. So with this equity score assigned, we can also assign ridership a score, safety a score, cost, feasibility a score. These scores update our deployment from 2 choices to priority. You'll notice that the no's still stay no's. The threshold for shelters at sites remains. We're just updating our yes option to a priority ranking. This update assures that the locations in our service area with the greatest ridership, the lowest design and construction costs, the greatest transit safety concerns, and now greatest equity concerns can receive shelters and upgrades with a methodology that assures citizens and sites most in need are served with priority. So to recap, I'll share this newly constructed bus stop and shelter. Our goal remains the same, to safely connect people to places. So this shelter deployment plan update leverages all available metrics and resources to ensure our citizens and locations in the greatest need are prioritized first. Safe harbors along our network for all, but for some first. So again, the action item is approval of this equity tool for shelter deployment and a task order with AECOM for $60,000 of engineering and architectural design services in support of that plan. What questions can we answer for you?
Commissioner Clark?
He rose his hand before me.
Yeah, but I like you better.
Oh, Jesus.
Ladies first.
I didn't say that. So first of all, let me say thank you for the presentation because I love the benchmarks that you're looking at as it relates to equity, but I also think we need to look at the environment around us. So your number 3 selection, that completely, I've seen those two little things. It completely exposes persons to the elements, like for today. Or even the heat that we have where it's high humidity, high heat. So I know that's 3rd on the list, but I would really see that as a 2nd versus your number 2, where it's one of the older shelters that they started putting in place when I served years ago. But at least there's some covering. So I would just like to see that happen and occur. And the only other thing is for your average equity index score, this may be based on data that was provided, I don't know, I guess through census tracts and things of that nature. But I will tell you that when you are to the right of 34th Street, which is, I guess, that yellow curvy line, Palmetto Park and some of those other neighborhoods, they have really been gentrified. Homes now 600,000 and above. Dolman Properties has really gone in there and purchased a lot of homes, and so the population that used to be there, even when the census was taken, it has completely changed. So I think, I don't know if we've ever thought about, or even if you look at the property appraisers line and just see the sales of homes in those which were former areas that were considered impoverished. Go look at the home sales, and that'll show you in various tracks how it has really turned around. But I don't want to take service away. I'm just sharing that because it is changing the dynamics of how some of these areas look.
Yeah, thank you.
It really has. But I like what you're doing, and I certainly support what you're doing. I just would love to see the 2nd place move up
Thank you.
because that completely exposes persons to the elements.
So this is, we're trying to score these elements, so it's not so much a ranking of if they, like the shelters, for example, the legacy shelters, those come up when those shelters need replacement. So if they're still functioning and existing, that is, that's something we'll keep out there. But once they start to wear, I'll say, that's when they come up to that list and they're evaluated on that so that we can deploy new shelters. So really it's meant to be taking all those things into account. There's no ranking for equity versus ridership versus, they're all looked at holistically.
Yeah, just, because like I said, today it's raining, so if you are trying to go to work and you're on those 2-seaters, you're soaking wet.
Yeah.
Which makes it a little more difficult to traverse your day.
Right, and that's what this is all about, is trying to identify those priority locations so that we can get them there first. It's always a struggle. I mean, we would love shelters at every stop if we could, but that's exactly the goal of this, to find out if we do have that stop meeting those metrics so that we can say, look, this is moving up the list. Let's go ahead and target this. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Albritton?
Well, you pretty much covered what my concerns were, but, I really don't understand this deployment plan, 2022. I mean, I'm in the same thought too, that, why do you have a bench down here with a no and a bench up here in the first place?
So those are just, that's just a broad brush. That's not an actual evaluation. I just wanted to show that we get sites, and so we have to evaluate. That's not a real representation. I will tell you, though, that factors like right-of-way are a big piece of that. So even if a site looks like a prime candidate, if there's a right-of-way line without enough space, because we need a footprint for a shelter, if we don't have that right-of-way, then the cost skyrockets. 5 times the cost. So that's just meant to be an example. It's not an actual site.
Okay, well, it's not that big of a difference, but I don't understand what the difference between the no and the yes is. They look like the same thing.
So an example could be that that one is in an area of high equity need and the other is not. We could also, one of those no's possibly could be $100,000 to construct, because we have to acquire right-of-way from a private property owner.
Okay.
So that would be an example of something where they might look the same, but something shakes out when we start doing our investigation.
Okay.
Usually where you see those little seats that are attached to the bus stop like that, that means that there's no, like the sidewalk is right up against the road and the right-of-way is, for the DOT right-of-way is right there and there's no room for a shelter.
And I'll give you an
In most
example.
cases.
Sorry, Brad, to interrupt. US 19 in South St. Pete, kind of Skyway Marina District, that area. FDOT has a project coming through.
Right.
And they realized that their sidewalks as they exist today are on private property. So when half of their sidewalks on private property, now that's their own issue to deal with, but that's the difficulty we face, that if we see a sidewalk and we say, oh, great, they've got a sidewalk there, let's put in a shelter, we go look at who owns that property, and FDOT doesn't own it, it's a private landowner. So that could be an example of a no, because then we have to engage a private landowner and say, hey,
Can you
can
permit
you make a
it?
donation of this land? And they say, no, we'll sell
We'll sell it to
it
you.
for $200,000 or $100,000. They name the price, so that's an example.
Okay.
Mr. Fix Sanders?
Hi, first of all, good morning, everyone. I have maybe a statement or two and a whole bunch of questions. So as far as the traffic visibility, because this was one of the issues that we had in our neighborhood, is an issue of public safety. Although we would like to ensure safety from the elements from all bus riders, it's just not feasible, because when we've done some of the the accident evaluations in some of the areas where we now have current bus stops, no matter how tall, how transparent, however, whatever we try to put up, it caused a lot of accidents. So if they've previously been there and have been removed, hopefully they're taken out of the consideration, because that would be a useless waste of our dollars, knowing that it's still gonna cause the same incidents that we had before. One of the equity variables that was mentioned, I didn't see the homeless population on there. Again, we do have that issue where you have a lot of our homeless residents that make those as homes, so our bus riders don't use them anyway. So I don't know how we're going to address that moving forward in determining priority and the types that we're actually going to use on that, because we don't want to deter anyone from using that stop, especially if it's a necessity. But we also know we want to be mindful of those that are houseless and how we address that. So hopefully we also have a partnership with how do we determine the priority of those, and there's certain areas of the city where our homeless population utilize the shelters more than others, how you're going to incorporate that in the equation. And then going back to the right-of-way on public property, that was another issue that we found when we were looking at some of the bus stops, is the right-of-way and how far it is from the street. We look and we want to put our residents, we don't want to put them in harm's way. But although we're not responsible for every car on the street, the closer they are to the street, the more likelihood of someone with attention just distracted. I like the one that you had, I don't know if it was the number one. And I don't know if that was a case where we were exceptionally blessed to be able to have more of the private use of the right-of-way. I would hope that we would look at the proximity from the street as far as one of the priorities, because I don't want someone to be sitting there comfortably, and because of where they are, their chances for injury is increased because of the proximity from the street. And I think those were all of my notes.
So 2 points, and I love when board members drill down on things that they have identified. I mean, you know our system and you ride our system, and so you see these things out in the wild. We look from a technical standpoint at many of those things. These are new sites, so we have over 4,000 bus stops throughout the county, about 4,600. So when new requests come up, that is our opportunity to evaluate. And now we can evaluate all we want, but if it's not a new request, there's not much priority with those. So we do look at those, especially if there's a curb and gutter that's raised. or if it's a flush shoulder, which would mean no curb and gutter. And there's different setbacks that we require, and so you'll notice, like out on, I think Roosevelt here, that's a flush shoulder, so there's no curb and gutter, it just flows right into the grass. We tend to push those back much further because of the danger factor. It's always something that we try to be aware of. As far as the homeless and houseless population, when we're deploying shelters, we do have a threshold, and that threshold is remaining. 25 riders is what we want for a site with a shelter. So if we have 10 riders there and somebody requests a shelter, we just say, well, we'll go ahead and look at a bench, but that doesn't meet that threshold because we want to put out shelters where they're most effective. And transit and houselessness can be very linked. It is something that we will reach out to community agencies and try and let them know. But for transit's sake, we're aware of it, but it doesn't fall within our purview. So we try and get the professionals who do those things to take that up, and they're the experts. So we are aware of it, and I thank you for the comment.
And also, too, just to add on to that, and it takes more than us being aware, and I do appreciate the fact that the board heard concerns last year in regards to the cleanliness, and that's something that we deal with in council all the time. And did we still have that contract with that new cleaning company? Okay, so when we look long-term, we still, it took us a minute to get there. It took us a minute to identify the fact that the PSTA did accept responsibility for additional cleaning services, which is why you actually approved that. But still, I want us to be mindful in the maintenance and upkeep of these shelters, because that is something that is vital. And we've gotten away from that. With the
I call
maintenance
Brad
of
all
it.
the time. I'm like, Brad, can you get
we
somebody
have
down
to.
here?
So, that also needs to be considered strong.
And we have a great relationship with our facilities department that maintains our shelters. So we'll have those conversations, and we'll get that feedback from them and that understanding. So it's another great idea. We are looking at that, and we try to look at the whole package. So thank you.
I just gotta share this. Down from my church on 16th Street, the little shelter that was in front of Bethel Heights, now Orange Grove or Citrus Grove, whatever it's called.
Yeah.
It is a little apartment now.
No, they moved.
I know, but that's what I'm saying. That's what's making me think about your point. It was like 4 people,
Yeah.
and they had like claimed it as theirs.
A mattress on the
And
side.
it was like a little apartment.
Had a little mattress. Yeah.
And they invited their little guests in. I would go to church on Sunday, and they had, everything was,
Yeah.
but they'd be sleep like underneath the bench if it was like inclement weather or whatever, really hot. And it, of course, it's gone now because that's what people they wouldn't catch the bus there, or they would stand like on the corner and wait for the bus to come because of that. The other one is right in front of Publix on that'll be 16th Avenue and 34th Street, right there in front of Publix. A lot of folks like to gather there, and you see it. And they have their meet and greets there. And then the other one is at the Wawa before 38th Avenue, where 30th Avenue and 34th Street. So they those are the key ones primarily in St. Pete, where it's like a gathering, meeting, semi-apartment, hangout hub.
There was a little efficiency,
Yeah, and the police have been very good. I mean, I've seen them go there, they're trying to get them into services, and they're calling, to get someone from HLA there, the Homeless Leadership Alliance, to get someone there to, work with them. So I've seen those teams out. But yeah, drive down, maybe like later this afternoon, yeah. They just hang out. And they're not mean or nasty to people, anything like that, but they do leave behind their junk, trash, and debris. And other people who really want to catch the bus won't catch the bus because they're there. And then the one at 38th is the one that I called you and said, hey, can we get somebody down here to clean it because the garbage is
Yeah.
flowing over and stuff is all around and clean it out, which you did. You responded very quickly. I just had to share that. I'm sorry, that's not on the agenda.
Cassandra, did you have something you wanted to add to this?
I think it would be good, BJ, if you also talked about how we stretch our shelter dollars through the shelter match program.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. So our shelter match program takes place when a municipality or the county reaches out to us with a request. Sometimes it's a specific location, sometimes it's within a CRA. And so we do an evaluation in that case. If our thresholds are not met, then we will let the county or the municipality know, look, this doesn't rise to the what we deem for a shelter, and we offer to them to fully fund that. And so if it's important enough to that municipality, they will often fund it through the CRA, or we even have like a 50-50. So if it's not quite enough, if it gets halfway to meeting our standards, then we'll say, well, we can contribute a fixed amount, they contribute a fixed amount, and it's a good way to partner. It's a great way to partner, and it really helps save our dollars for the priority locations. Is that covered?
That is good. Partnerships are great.
It is.
Can you tell the members of the committee which are more recent shelter match program agreements that we've had with cities?
You might be better at that. But I know that we've had discussions with Largo on community redevelopment areas. I know there's always a conversation with the city of St. Pete. We've got a great relationship with that staff. Those are the two that come to mind.
The county community development block grant program, Skyway Marina District. We've had a number of agreements with the city of St. Petersburg and the city of Largo, as you mentioned, but also through the
That's
county.
Skyway Marina right there. I just had to throw that in.
I'm
because I think
trying to
it's just
visualize
a
where
great-
that
a great
is.
stop.
Where is that? Which avenue is that?
37th, so it's off of 34th Street, it's 37th, and,
So
I
that
think
would be just north of like the IHOP, right?
it's right around the IHOP.
Okay.
The Publix is south of there.
The old entry turn
Yeah, and the new
into Maximum.
Starbucks, the new Starbucks that's
Okay.
on.
Yeah, where
US
Lewis
19
Place is.
is right on the other, on 34th Street. So 34th Street's back behind this photo, so this is 37th and like 40th.
It's right off the
40th
street
or something.
instead.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
I'm sorry, right off the avenue instead of the street.
Okay, I do have one more question.
Yes.
We don't always know what we don't know. And a lot of the information about shelters that I get actually come from constituents like the Little Efficiency. I would see that because that's in my neighborhood. So I saw that one. And I think I made the call on that one a couple of times. When you go out and you do the maintenance of these shelters, do you not take for your own data, stats, collection, problem area? I hate to say problem areas, but you know the term I'm trying to use.
Repetitive cleaning
Yeah,
requests.
that are high maintenance, because time is money, you know, and the more you have to go out. Do you all notate that?
Yeah, I know Missy, who's in charge of our facilities, does. She keeps a lot of stats on a lot of things, and it goes back to, you don't know what you don't know, and you can't manage what you can't measure. And so Missy tries to measure those things so that we can manage it, so that if we need to double the trash pickup, for example, that we get that feedback. So yes, that does come back through so that we can elevate those locations and say, one trash pickup a week is not enough, we need two, or we need some other kind of cleaning. So there is a good communication pipeline.
And the reason why I ask is because I am trying to monitor sanitation, especially in St. Petersburg, especially in District 5. And I was hoping I could probably get access to that, to work with our sanitation department to see how much we can also help assist in keeping that area clean. Because right there by the shelters, there's always a city-provided garbage can. And so I would see the garbage empty, but the trash around it not. And I never understood that. And I know we do have a large item pickup process, but I needed to understand why you would not clean up the trash that is in close proximity of that garbage can.
Yeah, so that's outside of my purview. I know that if there is trash on the ground, that it will be picked up by our folks, but I'm not totally tuned into what that.
And you wouldn't be. That's why I wanted to find out if you collected the stats on that, where I can kind of monitor it and go back and say, why don't you help?
Yeah,
Pick it up.
Missy would know more about that. What's the best way, Brad, to?
Well, I know, and Commissioner Vic Sanders, I know you had sent some emails. Ross Silvers is here, who attended a meeting with the city recently on the increasing homeless issues and the trash at the bus stops. And number one, I know the way our contract works with our trash pickup across the whole county is they have routes. And it's based on each bus stop with a trash can, or every bus stop in the whole system is in the system on whether it should be picked up as needed, once a week, some, like in downtown St. Peter, like twice a day, and they have routes. But then in addition, now with our new contract, we have this, I don't know, I think it actually is an app, it's an app, where you can, if you see trash, you can immediately log it into the system. And I know we have given access to all of the city of St. Petersburg. I don't know about other cities or not, but at least I saw in the notes at the meeting that the sanitation director for St. Pete said that has been great. What they can do is then when they see trash, or they hear from a council member or something about a hotspot that needs to be collected right away, they put it right into the system directly, and our contractor gets out there immediately. Rather than going through the old way, which was to have to phone PSTA and figure out whose problem it was, whose trash can it was, they just put it into the system, and it gets addressed right away. So that, the problem areas, or areas that suddenly have a lot of trash, that seems like it's getting a little bit better. The homeless issue, I think Ross can speak better to what solutions were identified at the meeting.
Well, I won't take time at this meeting to get that. I'll follow up with him, Ms. Jones, who was actually requested the meeting. But
Okay.
just to your point, and that the shelter that Commissioner Flowers spoke about, although we removed the shelter, a lot of the trash still remained today, because I take that 16th Street all the time. And that's why it came to mind. It's like, okay, well, who was supposed to pick up, the large items that were still remaining? And I know that may have been large trash item to us, but it was whoever that was living there, their only possessions, but they were still there for a while after the shelter was moved. So it's like, okay, so what's the fine line,
I know.
what is what, so.
And to your point about getting some information about that, like about specific stops, I know the system keeps track
What's the name of the system?
like
Barry?
the hot spots and things like that over a period of time. We can get you that data.
You know the name of the
Property
app?
track is what we use internally, and so what Brad was saying about working with City of St. Pete, that is open to, we can open it to all the municipalities we want to. We just, City of St. Pete, we've already worked with. So if somebody from City of Largo or City of Seminole was to come to us, we would immediately hand them that information, and Missy has a page about it, so that they can log in to our system and alert us of that. If it's at one of our sites, we take that on, but there are split duties at a few sites, and I know City of St. Pete, there are places where they own the trash can, and so and we know where those are as well, but there might be a split service between whether they serve or we serve.
Yeah, if I can get the name of that app, that would be great, because we use SeeClickFix. So I just don't know how that communicates with each other with what you're using, because I'm just finding out, hearing about that app, so that's a good thing if we can find out.
So,
what
yeah,
that is.
and to that point, SeeClickFix will go to the city, whoever it is. And so the city staff, and I can't speak for all of them, but a good portion of the sanitation department knows if something comes in and it's a PSK bus stop, they can put it into our system. We don't, public transit agencies don't have access to SeeClickFix, that's a SeeClickFix thing. But we created our own system and are working with all of the municipalities so that they can input that to our system. Whatever the easiest way is for them, they can call us too, but the app is much better.
Okay, so you're gonna send us how to access the app? with the
Yeah.
app? Okay, all right, thank you.
Commissioner Albritton?
Well, I remember when we were talking about the contract for the new, people who were picking up the trash. I was amazed at the amount of the contract. And I'm like,
Yeah.
well, we have 4,600 stops, and somebody had brought up, well, what about furniture and couches and things that they just drop off, at the bus stop? And I think it was told to me that those are items you can call the city and say, hey, somebody is dumping large items here, and it doesn't really fall in our purview.
And it's all about communication, though. So, if it's at our bus stop, we might not be the one that are going to go pick that up, but if the communication comes through us, we route it to City of St. Pete, vice versa, or anywhere, Clearwater, anywhere in the county.
But yeah, it is, Henry can describe it's remarkable how much trash is at our bus stops that is clearly not
Yeah.
Rider trash.
Rider.
It's not rider trash.
Well, it was the tonnage that got me when I was looking at it going, are you kidding me? I don't know how many tons, 16 tons of garbage that gets picked up. Wow.
I have a couple of points. So, along the see-click fix, I don't know if it's possible to add a PSTA classification in the app itself. I know that's gonna be more for the city, but to help users identify spaces, which can help it communicate better versus someone at the city saying, is this a PSTA stop, or, or trying to determine that. You mentioned the municipal match. Is the match available for private landowners as well that may want a shelter at their location?
So there's a different process. If a private landowner does ask, they request a shelter, it most often happens with developers. And if developers, so the pay structure, developers will try to displace us, and we will come back and say, if you want us to move, then you have to pay. You have to pay for us to move. And so that's the most common. We don't typically. I can say that there have been requests, maybe from an agency, but we like to be sensitive to not deploying, even if it's going to be cost neutral. We don't want to put out a shelter for 3 people and then have an issue where you've got people gathering in there because there's not enough traffic. There's not enough foot traffic at a site, and so if we put something up with very low ridership, it can invite people. So we have a process that we balance out, but if private landowners, if they pass that process, then they typically take on that cost fully.
And within the shelter match agreement, there is a portion that we add on for a certain number of years of maintenance. So we've talked a lot about maintenance here. It is something that we think about when we're doing the shelter match program, especially since if the shelter doesn't meet our ridership warrants, and we're going to be spending money on maintaining that, it is important. So to BJ's point about putting a shelter out for a low number of people, we have to think about long-term still maintaining it. But your original question was, will we take anybody's money?
Yes.
And the answer, as I look at Debbie behind you, is yes.
I can feel.
Yes.
Right behind me.
She's just right
If
directly
you
in
know a
my.
developer
right-
that's
yeah.
interested in a shelter, please let us know.
Yes.
Well, and I don't have a list of developers that have been, knocking on my door saying, hey, can we get shelters? But I wanted to just understand whether that program is available on both sides. Talking about ridership, one of the questions that I had that came up during your presentation, and I know we've kind of gotten away from the equity lens and whether we should be, using these services to add that on there. I was wondering how you balance, and we talked a little bit just now, but balance ridership versus bus frequency, right? So in my mind, if there's a high ridership, then we would want a shelter in that area because it serves more people. However, if there's less frequency of a bus service, that means we have people out in those elements for a longer period of time, right? If there's a 15-minute headway, bus coming, if it, Sunrunner, right, coming every 15 minutes, then it might be serving a lot of people, but for a very short period of time where there might not be as much of a need versus someone baking for an hour in the sun. So how does that factor
Yeah,
in.
yeah, so we try to take that holistic look at what's happening there, what routes serve that, is it a transfer point? So if it's a transfer point, that is a specialty situation where somebody could be waiting for 45 minutes. We try to be more sensitive to that. However, if someone gets to a bus stop early that only serves one route, it's kind of like, well, you got there an hour early, and it's hard to say where they left from. I mean, I usually recommend that you just.
To be fair, they may have gotten there 2 minutes late. Right,
Yeah,
so
yeah. I've been that person.
You know,
I've been that
and
person.
anyone who's used the transit app knows that just because it says the bus is gonna be here in 3 minutes, it could have already passed 4 minutes ago. It's not 100% accurate. So I understand that, you know, some onus is on the rider to, you know, plan when you're gonna be outside or whatnot better, but it can work the other way.
Yeah, so we try to look at a corridor perhaps and say if we have a sheltered stop that is already 500 feet away, we'll try and take that into account. It's not to say that if both were high ridership that we wouldn't, but it is part of the holistic package. It's pretty involved. I mean, when we get a request, we have an amenities committee, which many of you have heard of. We have 8 different departments that sit on that committee to discuss what, maybe it's sanitation issues, what we've seen there historically. We've got planning to talk about the routes that serve that area. We've got scheduling there. We've got operations there. We've got project management there. So it is something that we try and look at the full package. And really, it comes back to resources and where we can deploy and what gets deployed before another. So we do try to look at it. It's not just the 5 items of equity and safety and cost feasibility, but there's 2 in there, the bus safety and the site safety. But it's not only those. We do try to take a larger approach.
Okay. I don't believe, do any of our shelters have lighting?
They, all the current shelters have lighting. It's a solar, it works with a solar cell. So everything that we're deploying now, yes, has lighting.
Okay, is there also an ability to potentially add that sort of lighting to existing shelters that may be experiencing some of these other problems?
I know that some of our historic shelters do have that. I don't know how many. It could be all of them for all I know, but I know at least some of them do. That is something that we try to do. Even on the new shelters, it can be a battle where we will try and deploy, let's say it's a new shelter. It had a light when it went in, and some people will vandalize those, and so if a light's out, we'll go and reinstall. Henry, you have any thoughts on that?
Here we go.
I will tell you,
Illuminate us.
when we started out with the brown shelters, when we first started putting those in, they were solar powered initially. Not all of them, I think, went in, but when I was on the
Yes,
board
solar,
previously and we started, they were, and that was a safety concern for women, especially in the evening time. That's how that was brought up. So some of them may not be inoperable now, but they started out that way. Hey.
Hi. So many of our older shelters were actually, used to be hardwired to the utility. They all had their own electrical meter. It was very cumbersome, not to mention very difficult to maintain, well over 100 some odd electrical accounts. So yes, with those older ones, as BJ mentioned, all of our newer shelters come with solar lighting. We've gone back over the years and facilities has come up with a retrofit kit for those older shelters to put solar lighting, similar to the same output of the newer shelters. And we've hit most of them because I can tell you that I think that we only have one electrical account for a shelter now. We have done it.
When it comes to sanitation and homelessness, and do our bus drivers log those as they're driving? And, right, so they're on the routes and they see where stops are having problems.
Yes, so we have a program called From the Driver's Seat, and they're pieces of paper because they're out on the road. And so
Right.
they can fill those out from time to time, and we hear everything from ideas for routes, the way people are using them, to limbs being down at stops or trash overflowing. It all comes back through dispatch and then gets distributed throughout the agency.
So from a training perspective, have many of the drivers adopted, those sorts of practices where they're identifying issues throughout the system, or is it, there's a handful of drivers that do it, and most don't? So I'm trying to understand, if we have a system in place, are we actually training and encouraging the use of that to help provide more information back?
So one of the things we do for the department level is take a look at those comments, and one of the things is making sure that we get back to the operator that their comment was heard and that we've addressed it. And so we are making it clear that when they send those things and they don't slip into a black hole, right? They get addressed, and we make sure that they know that we've done something about it.
Okay.
But to answer your other question about, is it a handful or is it everyone? I mean, I think it's just like anything else. There's some operators that fill them out all the time and other operators that don't. But it is part of the training program.
And when you have some that do it and some that don't, to me, that becomes more of a training opportunity, and helping to understand why that's important for the overall system and how it makes things better, makes the different spots safer. So, but if, we already have great adoption, more than you would normally expect in an organization, then we're doing a great job with that. So just trying to understand whether that's an area of improvement or already working pretty well. That's all I was trying to get at.
If I may, I'll add to the secondary to that is we do have a road supervision unit. That's part of transportation, and they're out there all hours, that services on the street, patrolling our routes, responding to concerns, whether it be a down tree limb, whether it be homelessness, whether it be issue at a shelter that needs maintenance. So they're up and down our routes all day, every day. So there's that extra trained set of eyes that respond to those things and route them to the appropriate place.
I just, when I hear, commissioners and other leaders in the community say that, they called in that there was an issue with a stop, I wonder how many buses went by that stop? How did we not already know, given the fact that we're flowing by these things all the time, that it had to get to the point where someone was, someone higher up, or it was being reported by multiple constituents and coming back that way? So just wondering if we're doing all we can to make sure that that information flow is coming back here, so that we can then deploy the resources that we have to take care of those. So ideally, we would never hear anything, because it was all, just getting taken care of, or if there was something, it was happening, the system was working. So when we hear that it's not, to me, that's an opportunity. The last thing I had, and I don't know where we stand with this, but, and it doesn't quite fit this, but we're talking about shelters. Adopt a shelter or adopt a stop. Have we investigated that or looked at that or re-engage with communities? I know my neighborhood has 2 shelters and probably 8 stops. And I would love for us to come out and help beautify and keep and maintain the grounds, but we don't know what we can do, we don't know what we should do, we don't know who to talk to about it. Right, and so that's also a missed opportunity with other resources in the community to make our lives easier, and our riders, who are also our community members, because they're interacting with our community.
It is a program. It's alive and well. There's several residents that either have a shelter or a stop. No, I shouldn't say a shelter on their front lawn, but a stop in their neighborhood. They do call us, and they ask what they can do. We supply them with trash bags and receptacles, and so it is alive. Now, actively marketing it, yes, I would agree that perhaps if there is a greater interest in the community of adopting a can, especially if it's a stop in a communal park area or something, sure, we can certainly look at that.
Yeah, I think the main thing for me is, right, I wouldn't have even thought to ask unless I was sitting here right now. And so I know most of those folks are not in these meetings to know to ask, so a lot of this stuff is a bit of an outreach on our part to find community partners who are out there willing to help out. Even if we, did a, program to keep Pinellas beautiful, to coordinate on some things and work on certain stops in certain areas. Again, these are all opportunities completely separate from the action item in front of us. So I'd like to turn back to the action item. Are there any other questions about this particular action item or the use of equity variables in the shelter deployment process? No? Then I will entertain a
I'll
motion.
make a motion for approval of an equity tool for shelter deployment for a not to exceed amount of 60,000.
Second.
All right, there is a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right. Commissioner Fix Sanders?
Okay, I know we've already voted, and this isn't gonna change my vote or any input to it, but I did have a risk management question in me when we talked about accepting developers' dollars for private requests for shelters. And we, all money and good money. So before we actually put it, even though it was requested, do we do our own assessments of the public safety issue regardless? And if it does not suit that location, we will say no?
I love these questions, because you all are really, really getting into the weeds, and it's awesome. We have final say. We have
Okay.
final say of what we serve with the bus. And so
Exactly.
I know, right?
It has to meet the criteria for boarding and lighting area. It has to meet, we give them our specifications for a shelter pad. We're out there, we inspect it, and ultimately, if it's not constructed to our liking, and they've paid for whatever they've done, if it's not constructed to our liking, we'll say, we're not gonna serve this with a bus, so you all can either pull it out and replace it with something we want. Now, that's not tough talk that's typically needed, they usually will do whatever we need them to do, but ultimately, we decide on what's acceptable and what's not.
And the reason why I asked, it may have been in the weeds, but if there's something traumatic or detrimental that actually happens with that privately requested shelter, we will hear it, usually after the fact, but I want to prevent us from having to address issues after the fact if I know that there's something in place to be proactive in ensuring that safety. So thank you so much.
Thank you. For your adopted shelter thing, it may already have occurred, but I was honored by the Boy Scouts of America. So I'm gonna pass that along to their corporate office, because that would be a wonderful project, like for Boy Scouts who are trying to earn their Eagle badge, or a group that's trying to get their Otter badge, same for Girl Scouts, or a number of organizations where youth are trying to get some volunteer hours, to go out to stop, pick up the junk, trash, and debris, wearing gloves or whatever. That would be a nice little project.
Not for nothing along those same lines, installing little free libraries at bus stops in certain areas.
For little kids that take the bus with their parents, yeah.
And different books every day. I mean, I actually had an Eagle Scout candidate it wasn't installed at a bus stop, but make little free libraries for our neighborhood. But, putting them at the bus stops, especially the ones that are serving kids.
To a little free library today.
Is pretty good. I will say, one of the things and this is completely separate, so thank you, BJ, I don't necessarily
No,
make you
I
hold the floor.
We swam through the weeds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although Commissioner Fig Sanders is not gonna let you go.
No, this is not for him. This is just more meeting protocol. I was going to ask a question for new board members and those that are watching from home, and I know the gentleman came with the wealth of information, but I still don't know your name.
I'm Henry Lukassic, Director of Maintenance.
You don't know him, but
He
you felt his
presented
presence
when we were doing-
everywhere.
When we were doing the electric
Yeah,
buses,
yeah.
and he was the one that presented on.
But
how
you're depending on my memory.
Oh.
So,
And Commissioner Rick Sanders, he's the app man, he's
Yeah.
the property track
Okay.
man
Hold
that you
on
need
one
to talk to.
second. So Commissioner Fig Sanders,
Maintenance, okay.
one of the things that along the lines of what developers are doing, I was always surprised, and I may be misinformed at this point, that part of, like in St. Pete, we don't require a certain amount of shelters to be done by developers. Creating a transit space, whether it be for Uber or PSTA or whatnot. But I remember we had this conversation. It was pre-COVID that we were talking about this. I'm building a brand new building in downtown, but what am I doing to create a transit stop for the community? you're right, we have requirements for artwork, we have requirements for all sorts of other things to make the community better, but
Landscaping.
we don't necessarily have a transit piece. And I always thought that should be part, so instead of trying to get developers to ask for a stop, is requiring them to say, hey, you're putting in, 100 units here. You need to create a transit corridor for us.
And you're right, I don't remember ever having a discussion
I'll
about
bring that
that.
up.
We had it here,
I don't
so,
remember having it at the city.
But-
We
but,
moved
um,
on to 7-3. Okay.
That's a good point, though, because, we're really pushing utilization of public transportation, taking cars off of the road. We are seeing a younger generation
Mhm.
to come in that rides the bus, or takes their Uber or Lyft or whatever. So that's a really good thing.
well, and
I'll
that,
bring
and,
that up.
and
That's a
the
good
point is,
thought.
it would have to be a multimodal, right?
Mhm.
Right, so Uber, the delivery food, the bus, like, all of these folks.
So
can
they're
use
not
it.
pulling in a lane like they do
Right.
on their hazards to, yeah.
And then with that, we will, talk, extended awning so that there is a shelter from the sun. Those sorts of things can be done off of buildings that already exist too, to, make it easier for both the folks that live there, their guests, and the community at large.
Okay.
Commissioner Albritton, I think you had something.
Well, I've got it, well, Henry's here, I wanted to ask him something, but this last conversation, Thursday, tomorrow night, we're gonna be approving the development order for 600 apartment units on the bluff in Clearwater, in Imagine Clearwater. So Osceola is gonna turn into, with the hotel and parking garages and all the stuff that's gonna be popping up, that's something that we have talked about as a new transportation route down Osceola to pick up the people in that area. So that kind of applied to that conversation, that when the developers come in, they've already asked about it. We want to make sure that we have proper public transit in that area. Henry, my question to you is, the bus station downtown Clearwater, there's a couple of buses that have, like, I guess the operator's not in them, that have rolled out and run into building across the street. And I wanted to know, is that operator error, or is that it's a maintenance issue when they park the bus, that the brakes let go? Because, right now I have a building directly across from the bus station that has, the city has condemned it until they figure out the structural integrity of the building, and one business got displaced in there. And it's more than once, it's, I think, 2 times.
So those are new type vehicles. It is not an issue with the vehicle. It's just the fact that they're newer, and some things are in different places than there were others. Now, folks have been trained. We have since gone back in and made it such that if the brake is not applied, the parking brake, there's no park in transit buses function like an automobile, right? That there is a larger, louder alarm, an audible tone and light that alerts that the park brake has not been set. We've also gone in and put in some stop strips, stop bumps, so that it cannot roll backwards. So unfortunate, but we believe we have remedied that entire situation.
Okay.
So operator error is what I heard.
Yeah, because I heard that there wasn't anybody in the bus. I don't know if that was correct, but I go to a little restaurant right across, Emily's a lot, and
Emily's Kitchen.
yeah, and then I've had the owners there tell me of twice now that buses run into that building, and now they got yellow tape around it. So just wanted to find out from you what exactly happened and why. So
Cassandra?
Just one more thing before,
No, look, it's always one more thing.
one more presentation.
You're Columbo.
You're ready for the
Okay.
next agenda item, Chair.
Gotcha, I thought you were one more thing
no,
before the
no,
next
no,
agenda. No, we are
I'm
ready
ready
for
for
you.
The
the
gentleman that's up in the chat, he said Indian Rocks too. I just noticed that something's on the chat, so I asked him if they would check it, and he said Indian Rocks too, so I guess he's talking about bus shelter.
Shelter, yes, we
Putting
do.
shelter.
Communities that we partnered with
Yeah,
in the shelter.
yeah.
I think.
Yes, that's correct.
Cassandra, the floor is yours.
Cassandra Borchers, Chief Development Officer. I think is this working?
It's not. Noticed it's been, times
I
it's
may
off.
have to manually move it. Wake it up.
Yeah, I think it goes to sleep.
Okay. This is an information item. We'll take action on this item next month after a public hearing. So when we make changes to our routes 3 times a year, when we have a route that is going under a large service change, it's in the board rules and regulations that we bring this to a public hearing. So while I have good news overall for you today, one of the routes that we're going to be discussing does reach that threshold. So we're all very excited about the Sunrunner opening. We've made an announcement of the date, October 21st, which we're all frantically getting ready for. And as you know, we are adding a tremendous amount of service in the corridor between downtown St. Petersburg and the beaches, with increased service to 15 minutes from 6 a.m. to 8 p.m., and then 30-minute service after 8 p.m. But we do have a lot of other services in this corridor, and throughout the development of the project of the Sunrunner, we've been examining the system, and so there are some other changes that will happen as we open up the Sunrunner. One of those changes will be to the Central Avenue Trolley. And so right now, during the weekdays, it runs at approximately 20-minute headways. We will reduce that service to 30-minute headways 7 days a week. It currently runs at 30-minute headways during the weekends. Also, at the request of St. Pete Beach, with the opening of the Sunrunner, which will continue to provide service down to the County Beach Park, we will stop service at approximately 6:30 p.m. At 75th and Gulf for the CAT trolley. And so this is about a third of a reduction of the Central Avenue trolley service, even though there is, again, a tremendous amount of new service because of the Sunrunner in that same corridor. Another change that we have proposed as part of the service development is to truncate the Route 18, which comes from Clearwater through Tyrone and then on to Grand Central and then downtown, is to now, with the opening of the Sunrunner, have that service stop at Grand Central. This allows the Sunrunner to be the primary connection into a downtown. All of the frequencies would then remain the same, and we'd be able to work on the on-time performance for this route. This is a smaller reduction overall, but it is part of the overall system as we open up the Sunrunner, the changes that we would make to these certain routes. So as you can see, with the entire, those three routes altogether, there will still be an increase in service over the entire system. This proposal has always been part of our plan. It has been sent to FTA several years in a row as we were trying to get their participation in the capital program. So it has been part of our overall financial plan, both from a federal standpoint and from an operational standpoint, as the Sunrunner project has been developed. And overall, as I said at the beginning, overall we have good news that we are adding over 20,000 annual service hours in the corridor, even though these other routes will have some service reductions. We will be having a public hearing on August 11th, and Bob can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe it's going to be August 11th, and we will take this to the public and allow for public comment on the service changes overall, with the intention of making these service changes simultaneously with the opening of the Sunrunner. So again, this is an information item for you today, and will be an action item next month.
A question for you. On the Route 18, is there a reason why we're not truncating that line sooner? If people are gonna be switching to the Sunrunner at Grand Central, if that's the plan, why wouldn't we have them do it at the 58th or, somewhere sooner along the line and get the 18 back up towards Clearwater sooner?
What we see on the 18 is that there's lots of hub-to-hub travel. And so people may be coming from Tyrone into Grand Central to transfer to something else. So it's not necessarily that they're all coming in from one location, but it's really about getting to Grand Central, which has so many connecting routes.
Okay. Fair enough. Any additional questions? No? Cassandra, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other business items? All right, then we will adjourn this meeting. Our next meeting is August 17th at 10:30, and look forward to seeing everyone at the board meeting next week.
Sounds good.
Finally got
Thank
the
you.
restroom.
Good meeting.
Don't have an extra large coffee before.
This part of what you said,
See you later, man.
Okay.
Any word yet from Sherry? Nothing.